If you had told me 10 years ago that I would walk away from Sinclair Design Build Group with nothing after devoting my best years to it, I would have laughed in your face. My name is Ava Sinclair, and until recently, I believed I was the heir to the family legacy. I was 34, single, and living in Charlotte, North Carolina. While my college friends were planning weddings and posting about rooftop brunches, I was pulling 80-hour work weeks, managing sites, contracts, and problems no one else wanted to touch. I wasn't part of the company, I was the company. I handled zoning appeals, negotiated subcontractors, led crisis response. I ran operations so tight the lights couldn't flicker without me knowing. I earned my MBA while working full-time, built rapport with every supplier and city inspector. When a crane failed in Asheville, I slept in a trailer for 3 days to fix it. I gave up dating, skipped holidays, missed my best friend's wedding because I didn't trust anyone else to oversee emergency soil testing. My father, Gerald Sinclair, founded the company in 1986. Everyone said I was just like him, sharp, unflinching, relentless with numbers. He often said, "One day this'll all be yours, Ava. I'm just keeping the seat warm." That was my fuel. That was the promise. My mother, Marlene, never played much of a role in the business. When she did, it was always to smooth edges. "Don't push too hard, Ava," she'd whisper. "Your father sees you. He's proud." I clung to that. Through broken relationships and 2 a.m. breakdowns, I held on. Then there was Chloe, 2 years older. Everything I wasn't, warm, whimsical, always floating somewhere between coffee shops and gallery openings. She'd spent her 20s in Europe, documenting cappuccinos and cathedrals while I was under crawl spaces checking for mold. When she returned to Charlotte at 32, I assumed she was rebooting. Instead, she appeared at one of our Monday meetings, unannounced, and my father introduced her as our new creative strategy lead. No interview, no vetting, just Chloe. I didn't protest. I thought it was temporary. She had a few decent ideas, updated our pitch decks, built an Instagram page that trended locally. She worked part-time, showed up late, took long lunches. I tolerated her. We stayed in separate lanes. Until that Friday. We had just wrapped a chaotic third-quarter review. I stayed behind to finalize numbers for Westridge. While scanning the server for an old blueprint, I noticed the drawer labeled Legal. Private was unlocked. I had clearance, so I assumed it was harmless. Inside was a plain manila folder titled Sinclair Transfer Agreement, Executed. I remember the chill that hit my spine before I even opened it. Inside, notarized documents, dense legal language. But the numbers were clear. 75% ownership of Sinclair Design Build had been transferred to Chloe Sinclair. The rest? Split between my parents. No mention of me, no succession plan, no clause, no signature, no voice. The date? April 2nd, 6 months ago. 6 months I'd been pitching new software, salvaging stalled sites, training new managers, driving 130 miles in the rain to cover a no-show inspector. 6 months I thought I was building my legacy while they were quietly erasing it. I sat in my chair, folder open, heart thudding like a dropped hammer. Just then, Dean, one of our junior engineers, passed by my office. "Hey, Ava, everything good?" I must have looked like a ghost. "Yeah," I lied, "just tired." But it wasn't fatigue. It was betrayal. Not just professional, family deep. A clean deletion, written in legal ink. And it was just beginning. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as the same brutal thought looped like a metronome. They gave her everything. They gave me nothing. The date, April 2nd, was seared into my mind. 6 months. 6 months of silence while I was still grinding at full speed, while I missed birthdays, while I got stress migraines and made decisions that saved their bottom line. Chloe floated in like a breeze. I held up the damn foundation. By morning, I still hadn't decided what to do. Confront them? Pretend I hadn't seen it and dig for more? Call someone? I couldn't think straight, so I defaulted to what I always did when things spun out. I went to the office early. It was 6:40 a.m. The parking lot was empty, the sky barely lit. I wasn't there to work. I was there to confirm a fear that had already taken root. that they hadn't just sidelined me, they had erased me. Coffee in hand, I booted up my desktop and started digging, not aimlessly. I went straight into internal files, shared folders, team memos, anything Chloe had touched in the past 6 months. There were no blatant headlines, no new ownership org chart, no big announcement, but the signs were there, woven into the fabric of the company like thread you hadn't noticed until the color changed. Meeting notes titled Strategic Rebrand Vision, presented by CS. An internal memo shifting more client-facing duties to the creative lead. A draft board presentation from May 15th, Chloe listed as majority owner. Still no mention of me, not even a footnote. I didn't hear the door open, but when I looked up, Eleanor was standing in the doorway, our office manager of 25 years. She'd practically helped raise me. She taught me payroll before I could legally work, crocheted me a scarf the winter I got pneumonia. Her eyes dropped to the folder on my desk. "You knew?" I asked. My voice wasn't angry. It was hollow. She hesitated. "Your father asked us not to say anything until the time was right." I swallowed hard. 6 months, Eleanor. 6. You thought I wouldn't find out? Her expression cracked. It wasn't my place. No, I said, voice steady. It was theirs. But everyone else knowing before me? That's not just disrespect, it's humiliation. She stepped forward like she wanted to offer comfort. I picked up the folder and stood. I need to leave. No laptop, no phone. I just walked out, through the job trailers, past the Eastfield project, the one I salvaged after their first developer went bankrupt, past the diner where Chloe and I used to get milkshakes as kids. I wasn't driving toward anything. I was driving away. I ended up at my best friend's house. Natalie King, civil litigator, brilliant, fiercely loyal. We met in college and never drifted. I didn't call. I didn't need to. She opened the door in a robe, hair messy, coffee in hand. "Tell me who I need to sue," she said without blinking. I broke down. The tears came before I got 3 words out. All that I'd held together, pressure, shame, betrayal, cracked wide open in her arms. "I gave them 10 years, Nat," I whispered, "and they gave her the company." She held me like she already knew. "Come inside." I handed her the folder. She flipped through it with the efficiency of a trained knife. "Fully executed," she said. "Filed clean. She's the legal owner." "But it wasn't supposed to be hers," I choked. "It was supposed to be mine." She looked up. "Do you have anything in writing?" "Just 10 years of my life," I said. She sighed. "This isn't just about ownership. This is an inheritance dispute, without a death certificate, without a will, without warning." That word hit harder than I expected. Inheritance. No one had died, but something had. The future I thought I was working for. The version of me that still believed in loyalty. The family I thought I was building a legacy with. Natalie placed a hand on mine. "What do you want to do? Fight? Walk? Expose them? Start over?" I didn't have an answer, but I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I would never be the same again. I didn't go into the office the following week. I didn't call in, didn't send an email, didn't check the project management dashboard I usually lived on. Monday came and went with 6 missed calls from the team. Tuesday, I got a vague message from Chloe. "Hope you're okay. Let me know if you want to chat." I ignored it. By Wednesday, my father called twice. No voicemail, no apology. Just his number flashing on my screen like nothing had happened. The audacity. After everything. After erasing me from a business I helped grow from a 10-person shop to a 70-person firm with multi-million-dollar contracts and a spotless project record across 3 states. They thought I'd what? Bounce back? Pretend I hadn't found the folder? Smile through the betrayal? Natalie stayed close that week. We went on long walks. She brought over takeout. When she noticed me staring off into space too long, she'd snap her fingers and say, "Ava, stop rehearsing your imaginary arguments. Either call them or start writing your next chapter." But I couldn't call, not yet. I wasn't ready to hear the justifications. The excuses, the casual dismissal that I'd heard my whole life whenever I tried to ask for more than quiet gratitude. They'd already made their choice. Chloe was the chosen one now. The hardest part wasn't the shock. It was the slow realization that maybe I'd never really been considered, that despite all my sacrifices, they never truly saw me as more than a loyal workhorse, valuable, dependable, replaceable. They told me I was family, but they treated me like staff. Meanwhile, Chloe floated in like an unexpected breeze, and they handed her the whole kingdom. No performance reviews, no 10-year track record, no blood on her hands from failed inspections or busted budgets. Just vibes, creativity, and charm. I built the ship. She got the captain's chair. By Thursday night, I decided I needed to face it head-on. I wasn't going to call. I was going to show up. Sunday dinner had always been sacred in our family. My mother insisted on it, even during the busiest seasons. Roast chicken, her famous cornbread, wine that never matched the meal but always got poured anyway. It had been the backdrop to birthdays, contract wins, and even the announcement of Chloe's short-lived engagement 2 years ago. It was the one time of week we were all in one room. I knew they'd be there, and I wanted to see their faces. I arrived at 5:58 p.m., like always. The Sinclair home sat on a half-acre lot in the older part of Charlotte, a wide brick colonial with navy shutters and a manicured lawn my father still mowed himself. As I stepped onto the porch, the smell of rosemary and garlic hit me, pulling me back into a million Sunday memories I didn't ask for. I rang the doorbell. Chloe answered. She looked surprised, maybe even relieved. "Hey," she said. "You came." I walked past her without responding. Inside, my mother was lighting candles at the table. "Ava, sweetheart," she said, moving toward me for a hug. I let her, stiffly. My father was in the living room, reviewing what looked like architectural mock-ups. He barely looked up. "Good, you're here," he said. "We have updates on the Westridge campaign. Chloe's been taking point." I sat down at the table, took a deep breath, and waited for everyone to settle. The chicken was carved, plates passed, small talk offered. I said almost nothing. The longer they pretended this was a normal evening, the tighter the rage coiled inside me. Finally, when my mother brought out dessert, I set my fork down and looked at my father. "I know." The room froze. My mother paused mid-step. Chloe looked like she'd stopped breathing. "I found the transfer agreement, the one where you gave her 75% of the company." My father set down his fork. "We were going to tell you." "When?" I cut in. "After the next proposal I closed? After the next contract I rescued? Or were you just waiting until I burned out and quietly left so you didn't have to explain yourselves?" Marlene stepped in gently. "It was never meant to be a betrayal, Ava. We thought this would be less complicated." "Less complicated?" I laughed, but it was hollow. "You thought giving the entire business to someone who's been back for 15 minutes was less complicated than honoring the person who's run operations for a decade?" Chloe looked down at her plate. "Dad said you'd still be critical to the business, that nothing would really change." "That's the problem," I said. "Everything already changed. You just didn't think I'd find out." My father's voice sharpened. "This was a strategic move. Chloe brings a fresh perspective. We needed that. You're valuable, Ava, but you're—" He stopped himself, but I saw it on his face. "You're not who we chose." And he knew I knew. I stood up, heart pounding, breath tight. "I hope she's everything you need her to be, because I'm done giving my life to people who think value comes without respect." Then I walked out. No drama, no screaming, just finality. I didn't look back. I didn't cry after the dinner. Not in the car, not in the shower, not even when I climbed into bed and stared blankly at the ceiling for hours. I wasn't sad. I was emptied out. Something in me had shut down the second I walked out of that house, not just because of the betrayal, but because of how easy it was for them to sit there, eating roast chicken and pretending I hadn't been erased. My parents had made their decision. Chloe had accepted it, and I had finally spoken the truth, not just to them, but to myself. For years, I'd ignored the signs. I'd told myself I was building something, investing in my future, laying the foundation for the life I wanted. But the truth was simpler and harder. I was breaking. The kind of break that doesn't make a sound until it's already too late. I'd been burned out for years, but I didn't recognize it because I kept calling it discipline. I woke up at 5:30 every morning, had emails answered by 6:15, and was in the office before the lights were even on. I lived on protein bars, coffee, and momentum. I didn't just miss holidays, I resented people who didn't. I wore exhaustion like a badge of honor, convinced that being needed was the same as being valuable. But burnout doesn't announce itself. It sneaks in, one missed vacation at a time, one skipped doctor's appointment, one canceled dinner with friends. And when it finally hits, it doesn't feel like fire. It feels like nothing, like staring at a screen and realizing you've forgotten how to think. The Monday after that dinner, my alarm went off at 5:30 a.m. like always, but I didn't move. I stared at the phone buzzing on my nightstand, listening to the familiar chime, and for the first time in 10 years, I didn't feel compelled to respond. There was no meeting, no deliverable, no crisis that could drag me out of bed. I pulled the blanket over my head and stayed there until the light under my bedroom door turned orange. Mid-morning came and went. Emails piled up. I ignored every one of them. By noon, Natalie showed up uninvited. She let herself in, holding coffee in one hand and a bag of groceries in the other. "I brought lunch and non-judgment," she said, tossing her keys in the dish by the door. I stayed on the couch in sweatpants and a hoodie I hadn't worn since grad school. She didn't push, just set food down, opened my windows, and made herself at home. After a while, she sat beside me and asked, "What's next?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I didn't know. All I knew was that I couldn't go back. I couldn't walk into that office and pretend everything was okay. I couldn't make Chloe look competent while she got credit for my work. I couldn't keep bleeding for a company that had already written me out of the ending. "I don't know," I said quietly, "but it's not Sinclair anymore." That night, I wrote my resignation email, just a draft. I didn't send it, but it felt good to see the words. I listed my accomplishments, my actual measurable contributions, without bitterness or bravado. Then I opened a blank document and started listing what I wanted. Not from them, from me. Real weekends, time to cook, clients who respected my time, a leadership role where I didn't have to beg to be seen, maybe even a partner, a dog, sleep, a future that wasn't built entirely on someone else's legacy. The next day, I finally checked my work email. 73 unread messages. I didn't respond. Instead, I changed my out-of-office reply to something short, direct, and for once, mine. "Thank you for your message. I am currently on extended leave. Please contact Chloe Sinclair for any urgent matters related to Sinclair Design Build Group." I turned off the email app and left my phone on the kitchen counter. Then I put on real clothes, grabbed my laptop, and drove to the co-working space I'd toured last year but never joined. I signed up on the spot. That afternoon, I scheduled a call with Mark Hastings, the founder of Hastings Integrated Build, a fast-growing firm based out of Austin. He'd tried to recruit me twice in the past, but I'd always turned him down out of loyalty. This time, I didn't hesitate. We set a meeting for Friday. By Wednesday, 2 other former clients had reached out, people I'd built long-term relationships with who weren't happy with how Chloe was handling things. I didn't poach. I didn't need to. They were already looking elsewhere. My work had always spoken for itself. The burnout hadn't just drained me, it had hidden my worth behind loyalty. But now, without the weight of Sinclair on my back, I could see clearly. I wasn't done. I was just done being ignored. When people talk about sibling rivalry, they usually mean 2 kids bickering over attention or fighting over the last slice of pizza, not a multi-million-dollar company, not a legacy handed unevenly to one daughter while the other was still cleaning up job sites in steel-toed boots. Chloe and I never hated each other. That's what makes this hurt so differently. We were opposites growing up, but not enemies. I was the straight-A student, captain of the math team, the girl who organized her closet by color and season. Chloe was the free spirit, scrapbooking, painting, skipping prom to go to a poetry reading downtown. She was charming, impulsive, always surrounded by people. I admired that about her. I didn't envy it. I genuinely thought we could both thrive in our own way. I never saw her as competition because we were never in the same lane. But when she came back to Charlotte after nearly a decade away and stepped into the office like she'd always belonged there, that changed. My father handed her a title. My mother gushed about how nice it was to have both girls in the business. And I thought, okay, maybe this will be good. I didn't even push back when they made her creative strategy lead. I told myself it was harmless. Maybe she'd bring a new flair to our branding. Maybe she'd take over the softer side of client engagement. Let her have her space. I had the rest of the operation locked down. But that's not what happened. What happened is she slid into meetings I used to run. She started suggesting changes to proposals I'd already polished. Clients started calling her when they needed a timeline update, even though she didn't understand the structural side of what we did. My father began deferring to her in meetings, nodding along while she threw out buzzwords she'd picked up from some design podcast, and I smiled through it, even when I wanted to scream. I told myself it was temporary. Then came the real blow, the ownership transfer. She didn't just get a seat at the table, she got the table. I'd given up relationships, health, and rest to earn my place. She got hers handed to her with an engraved nameplate and a curated Instagram bio to match. I knew Chloe wasn't malicious. That's what made it more maddening. She was clueless, floating through the office without any real understanding of how many fires I was putting out behind the scenes. She thought charm was a substitute for knowledge, that her ability to connect emotionally with clients was more important than budgets, permits, and labor forecasts. But our business wasn't a gallery opening. It was construction. We were building hospitals, schools, city infrastructure. Timelines mattered, math mattered, and she had no idea what she was doing. Still, she wasn't evil. She wasn't cunning. She was just exactly what my parents had been waiting for. Someone softer, easier to mold, someone they could shape into their ideal without the resistance I'd started to give. My discipline had started to look like defiance to them. My assertiveness, once praised, had become hard to work with. Chloe smiled more. That's what it came down to. After I sent out my extended leave notification, I heard through one of the project managers that Chloe had stepped in to oversee the Westridge project, a massive mixed-use development we'd spent 2 years pitching. I had built the relationship with the city council. I'd run the environmental risk analysis. I had created the proposal timeline down to the week. And now she was calling the shots. I got the call from Maxwell Finch, the city's liaison on the project, on a quiet Tuesday morning. "Ava, I'm confused," he said, his voice tense. "Your sister just sent over a revised presentation for Westridge with new visual renderings and some different zoning assumptions. None of them match our previous discussion." I closed my eyes. "I'm sorry, Max. I'm currently on leave. I wasn't involved in that revision." "You built the entire proposal," he said, clearly annoyed. "Why is she changing it without notifying us? This throws our whole review process off." "I suggest reaching out to Chloe directly," I said, trying to stay neutral. "That's what I'm doing now," he snapped. "Because I don't want to talk to her. I want to talk to the person who knows what they're doing." That should have felt satisfying, but it didn't. It just made the rift between Chloe and me more real. I wasn't angry at Max. I was angry that he was right. Chloe had no idea what she was handling, but she was trying. She'd taken on a role she wasn't ready for, probably hoping she'd grow into it, while I sat on the sidelines watching my work unravel. That afternoon, I drove past one of our job sites, the North Point Senior Housing Project, a project I had personally shepherded through 4 rounds of zoning appeals. I didn't stop. I just watched from my car. The team was out in the field, checking grades, pouring concrete, moving equipment like clockwork, and yet I felt entirely disconnected from it, like someone who had once built something and then lost the keys. At home that night, I opened my journal for the first time in months and wrote one question at the top of the page: "Why does this hurt so much?" The answer surprised me, because I never thought I was in a rivalry, because I never thought Chloe wanted the crown, because I thought I'd earned it, and that was supposed to mean something, because they chose her anyway. Sibling rivalry only cuts this deep when you didn't know it was a competition until you'd already lost. It was supposed to be a routine cleanup day. That's how all this started. Just a Friday afternoon spent sorting through the chaos Chloe had created with her latest innovation, a full overhaul of our office filing system. She called it streamlining. What it actually meant was mislabeled drawers, half-scanned contracts, and color-coded folders that looked more like someone's Pinterest board than a functioning business archive. I'd agreed to help reorganize the archives after a meeting with one of our older clients revealed we'd filed a land deed under creative assets. I wasn't even surprised. The cabinets were in the back hallway, the oldest part of the office. I started with the drawer labeled Historical Agreements and worked my way down to Legal Private. The label wasn't new. I'd seen that drawer for years and assumed it was locked for legal reasons. But that day, it wasn't. Maybe someone had forgotten to close it properly. Maybe Chloe had opened it and never thought twice. Either way, the key had already turned. The manila folder was unassuming. No neon tab, no urgent red sticker. Just a plain file with a neatly typed label. Sinclair Ownership Transfer, executed. Something in my chest went cold. I pulled it out slowly, telling myself it was probably outdated paperwork. Maybe the deed from when my grandfather handed the company to my dad. But the date on the first page, April 2nd this year, stopped me cold. I stared at it, rereading it twice before my brain would even process what I was seeing. My name was nowhere on the document. Not as a recipient, not as a secondary stakeholder, not even as a witness. The transfer was clear and complete. 75% ownership to Chloe Sinclair, the remaining 25% retained by Gerald and Marlene Sinclair. That was it. Page after page confirmed the same message. I didn't exist on paper. I'd been erased from the future of the company I had built with my bare hands. I sat down right there on the office floor, knees pulled in, folder open in front of me. My breath got shallow. My ears rang. I felt a buzzing in the back of my skull that drowned out every thought except one. They gave it to her behind my back. I couldn't stop thinking about the endless late nights, the holidays I missed, the birthday dinners I turned down for project deadlines. I thought of the time I drove 6 hours round trip to fix a surveying error because we were under contract and short-staffed. I remembered my father saying, "That's the kind of dedication that'll make this company yours someday." He said it with pride, and now I knew he'd already given it away. It wasn't just a slap in the face, it was a rewriting of history, one where I'd never mattered, only managed. Chloe hadn't been in the room for the hard decisions. She hadn't stayed up till midnight redlining contracts. She didn't know the difference between structural fill and engineered backfill, but she had the name, the face, the narrative they liked better. I didn't realize anyone was near me until I heard footsteps behind the hallway partition. It was Eleanor, our office manager. She stopped short when she saw what I was holding. Her face went pale, then quietly resigned. "You found it," she said. I looked up slowly. "You knew?" She nodded, reluctant. "Your father said he'd tell you himself. He didn't want us involved." "That was 6 months ago." "I know." She stepped closer. "Ava, I didn't agree with it. I still don't. But I wasn't in a position to stop it." "Who else knows?" I asked. She hesitated. "Most of the senior staff. It had to be filed for board recognition and banking updates. So they all knew, all of them. Every partner, every executive, every department head. They'd all seen me walk through those doors every morning thinking I was next in line, thinking I was the future, while knowing I'd already been passed over. I stood slowly, folder clutched in one hand, fury tightening in my throat. I left without another word. That night I didn't eat dinner, I didn't shower, I didn't cry. I sat at my kitchen table and read every page of that document 3 more times. I highlighted things. I annotated margins. I made copies. I texted Natalie, then scanned the file and sent it to her with a single sentence. "You were right." The next morning she called me before 8 a.m. "This is airtight," she said. "They executed a full legal transfer. No breach of law, just a breach of every ethical standard you deserved." She was quiet for a second. "I need to ask, Ava, are you ready to fight this, or are you walking away?" I didn't answer right away. I was still looking at a small clause on the last page of the document, a paragraph about operational authority transition to be handled at the discretion of the majority owner. Chloe. Not only had they given her the company, they'd given her the power to phase me out, piece by piece. That answered Natalie's question for me. "I'm not walking away," I said finally. "Not like this." Natalie called Monday night. I hadn't spoken much to anyone since sending her the document. She didn't ask how I was. She just said, "I know you're not ready yet, but when you are, we can talk strategy. Legal, personal, emotional. All of it. I'm here." I couldn't speak for a moment. Not because I didn't have words, but because my chest was too tight. That's the thing about betrayal. When it comes from strangers, it stings. When it comes from your family, it redefines your entire history. You don't just lose trust, you lose memory. Every good moment gets retroactively stained. Tuesday morning, my mother called. I let it ring. Then she texted, "Can we talk? Just us. No pressure." I stared at that message for 20 minutes. Just us. As if she hadn't been part of the very team that sold me out. I thought about all the Sunday dinners, all the times she refilled my glass and said, "Don't push yourself too hard." All the times she looked me in the eye and told me I was doing the family proud. Had those words meant anything? Or were they just part of the performance, the script she followed while the real decisions were being made behind closed doors? I didn't reply. Instead, I took a long walk around Freedom Park, where I used to go running back in my early 20s. The weather was warm, 72 degrees, a soft breeze coming off the water. The kind of afternoon that normally would have helped me reset. But this time, the fresh air didn't clear my head. It just gave my thoughts more space to echo. I found myself thinking about Chloe, not in anger, but in sheer confusion. Did she know what she'd taken from me? Did she even want it? Or had she just accepted the offer out of some need to feel included, not realizing the cost? Part of me wanted to believe she hadn't understood the gravity of what she was signing, but that would mean letting her off the hook. And I couldn't do that. Not now. Not yet. Because even if she didn't orchestrate it, she hadn't stopped it either. She hadn't said, "Wait, shouldn't Ava be part of this conversation?" She'd taken the pen. She'd signed. The fallout wasn't just emotional. It was operational too. On Wednesday, I got a panicked message from one of our major clients, Lloyd Mason, from the Ridgeway renovation project. Chloe had apparently missed a key deadline and didn't communicate it. He emailed me directly, bypassing her. His subject line said it all. "Is anyone steering the ship over there?" I didn't reply. I forwarded it to my personal inbox and flagged it. A small piece of leverage, not out of spite, but because it was proof that the cracks were spreading. You can't fake leadership, and you can't inherit trust, especially not in construction. By Friday, I'd reached my limit. The sadness had burned off. What remained was something clearer, sharper, resolve. I was tired of waiting to feel okay. I wasn't going to feel okay. Not for a while. But that didn't mean I couldn't act. I scheduled a lunch meeting with Mark Hastings for the following Tuesday. Natalie and I started drafting a document outlining every major contribution I'd made to Sinclair over the past 10 years. Contract wins, client relationships, crisis recoveries, and efficiency improvements. We didn't touch anything proprietary, just the facts, just the truth. Because while my parents and Chloe had made their decisions, I was making mine. I wasn't going to let grief stall me any longer. The emotional fallout had leveled me. But now I was building again. Not for them. For me. They finally asked to meet in person the following Sunday. My mother texted first. Then my father followed up with an email, short, formal, almost like he was scheduling a performance review. "We'd like to sit down together, just the three of us. Let us know when you're available." I didn't reply right away. I waited 2 days, not out of spite, but because I wanted to be sure I could walk into that meeting without crying, yelling, or walking out halfway through. I needed clarity, not catharsis. We met at my parents' house, the same red brick colonial where I'd grown up, where we'd had every Christmas morning, every birthday dinner, every argument that ended with my father saying, "This is how business works, Ava." I parked across the street and sat in my car for 5 minutes before walking up the steps. Chloe wasn't there, thankfully. Just my parents, waiting in the kitchen, both holding mugs like they needed the comfort of warm ceramic to get through the next hour. They offered me coffee. I said no. My mother spoke first. "We didn't mean for you to find out the way you did." I didn't respond. She looked to my father, who cleared his throat. "This wasn't personal, Ava. It was a business decision." My laugh was quiet but sharp. "Then why did it feel like betrayal?" He shifted in his seat. "Because it was never going to feel fair. Not to you. But we had to make a decision based on what the company needed next. And Chloe, she brings something different." "Different?" I asked. "She brings flair, aesthetics, Instagram reels. I built relationships with city officials. I negotiated contracts that saved us millions. I ran the operation that funded this entire next chapter. What exactly is her edge?" My mother stepped in. "It wasn't about edge, honey. It was about succession. You've always run the business like a machine. Impeccably, yes, but so much weight on your shoulders. It wore you down. You looked tired, Ava. We thought maybe you didn't want it anymore." "You thought I was tired?" I repeated, stunned. "You didn't ask. You just assumed. And instead of asking your daughter if she needed support, you took everything away and gave it to the one person who hadn't earned it." They didn't argue. That silence was worse than shouting. My father finally said, "We thought we were protecting you. We thought giving Chloe the spotlight would give you space to breathe, that maybe you'd find something else, someone else." There it was. The unspoken implication. "You didn't have a life outside work, Ava. We thought maybe you'd thank us for setting you free." I stared at them, not out of rage, but because I genuinely didn't recognize the people sitting across from me. These were the same parents who used to praise me for outworking grown men on job sites in 90-degree heat, who said I was born to lead, who bragged to their friends about my work ethic and discipline. And now, they were rewriting my ambition as burnout and framing their betrayal as mercy. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just asked one question. "Why didn't you tell me?" My mother looked pained. "Because we knew it would hurt you." "And lying wouldn't?" I said. My father added, "We wanted to give it time. Let things settle. Let Chloe prove herself. Then bring you in on the transition plan once things were moving." "So you gave her the power first and figured I'd come around?" I asked. "Is that how you raised me? To accept being an afterthought?" My mother's hand twitched on her mug. She didn't speak. I stood up. "I needed this conversation. But I'm done now." "Ava," my father said, standing too. "We can still fix this." "No," I said, meeting his eyes. "You can't. Because it's not just about the company. It's about trust. And you broke it." I left without hugging either of them. The air outside felt different, cooler, clearer, like I could breathe again. I wasn't angry anymore. I was resolved. Their excuses had confirmed what I feared the most. They didn't think I was wronged. They thought I was rescued. And that made everything worse. It wasn't greed. It was erasure disguised as protection. They thought they were doing me a favor by taking everything I'd built and putting it in someone else's hands, and they still expected me to thank them for it. That night, I called Natalie. We reviewed the resignation letter together. Then we reviewed a second document, one that outlined my consulting services, independent of Sinclair Design Build Group. I wasn't going to sue. I wasn't going to fight them in court, but I wasn't going to let them rewrite history either. I was walking away on my terms, and I was going to build something that no one could take from me. The next morning, I hit send. Starting over sounds noble when someone else says it. They say it with admiration, like you're reinventing yourself, chasing your dreams, making a bold, clean break. What they don't talk about is the quiet panic of waking up that first Monday with no plan, no paycheck, and no idea who you are without your title. When I hit send on my resignation email, I felt powerful for maybe 15 seconds. Then came the stillness. Then the doubt. I spent the first few days reorganizing my apartment like I could declutter my emotions. I donated 2 garbage bags of clothes, rearranged my bookshelves, even cleaned out the junk drawer in the kitchen. But I still felt like something was missing. I wasn't ready to build something new, not yet, but I couldn't sit still either. It was like my body was still on autopilot, trained to hustle even without orders. Natalie helped me create what she called a transitional runway, 3 months of financial breathing room, legal protections, and emotional goals. Not business goals, emotional ones. You need to detox from the Sinclair grind before you can create anything sustainable, she told me. It was good advice. Hard, but good. So I didn't start a business right away. I didn't take any job offers. Instead, I met with people. Mark Hastings and I met for lunch at a bistro in South End. He offered me a consulting role on the spot. 3 major projects in Austin and Houston needed strategy support, and he'd trust no one more than me. The pay was generous, the hours flexible, but I told him I needed a little time. He didn't push. He just smiled and said, "When you're ready, let's build something better." Later that week, I met with Kyla Reyes, a former client who had since moved to D.C. to head up a sustainable housing nonprofit. She'd always appreciated my straight-shooting style and project precision. Over coffee, she said, "You ever think about building a firm that puts ethics and excellence on equal footing? Something that doesn't burn people out just to look profitable?" Her words stayed with me. A week after resigning, I flew to Denver. I hadn't taken a solo trip in years. I booked a small Airbnb near the foothills, spent mornings hiking and afternoons journaling. One entry simply read, "What would it look like to build a business without asking for permission?" That was the seed. By the time I returned to Charlotte, something in me had shifted. I was still angry, yes, but I wasn't stuck anymore. I'd spent too long letting other people decide what my future should look like. I wasn't doing that again. The first thing I did was buy a domain, Ava Sinclair Consulting. Clean, direct, professional. Then I began outlining the kind of work I actually wanted to do. Not legacy projects, not proving my worth contracts, but strategy. Real, structural, high-integrity operational leadership for teams who wanted excellence without sacrificing their people. I wasn't chasing scale. I was building smart. I hired a freelance designer to create a brand identity. I worked with Natalie to structure my new LLC. We called in a CPA to map out income targets, taxes, write-offs. I built a portfolio from the ground up, highlighting the exact impact I'd had over the last decade. Not fluff, results, numbers, efficiency gains, client retention rates, multi-million-dollar project turnarounds. Ava Sinclair, not the Sinclair daughter. And I didn't announce anything yet. No dramatic "I'm back" post on LinkedIn, no inspirational selfie about reinvention, just quiet, focused building. That silence paid off. By month 2, I had my first official client, a regional construction firm based in Nashville that had hit an internal wall scaling from $10 million to $25 million in revenue. They didn't need branding, they needed structure. I flew out, met with the executive team, and within 3 days had mapped a leaner, clearer workflow that eliminated $220,000 in waste annually. The CEO called me the next week and said, "Where have you been hiding?" I wasn't hiding, I'd just been buried. Meanwhile, word got out. Not in headlines, but in inboxes. One project manager from Sinclair texted me discreetly, "Ava, real talk. This place is wobbling without you." Another email came from an old city partner I'd worked with for years. "If you're on your own now, we'd love to move our next proposal through you." I didn't chase any of them, but I didn't say no either. And then, inevitably, came the message from Chloe. It arrived late on a Thursday evening, just a single line of text. "I didn't realize how much of the business you were holding together. I'm sorry." I stared at that screen for a long time. It wasn't the wrong thing to say, but it was too late to matter. She hadn't fought for me when it counted. She hadn't even asked if I was okay. And now that the cracks were showing, she was sorry. I didn't reply. Because part of starting over meant setting new rules. One of mine was this: I don't respond to guilt dressed as apology. I slept better that night. At first, the messages came one at a time. A forwarded email here, a voicemail there, then it became a pattern, then a flood. Clients, my clients, were reaching out to me directly, bypassing Sinclair's new channels, skipping Chloe entirely. Some were polite, some were confused, some were blunt, but all of them were saying the same thing without having to, "We trust you, not her." It started with Jenna Croft, the lead project manager for the Greenwood Medical Center expansion. We'd worked together for 5 years across multiple phases. She called on a Wednesday morning and got straight to the point. Chloe's been slow on replies. She missed 2 status meetings and sent a junior associate to one without briefing them. I don't want to sound impatient, but we're about to put real money down. We need someone who understands what's at stake. I paused. I'm not with Sinclair anymore, Jenna. I can't speak on their behalf. She exhaled sharply. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking if you're available. For consulting, I'll pay out of pocket if I have to. I didn't say yes right away, but I didn't say no either. A few days later came a message from Tom Delaney, the city zoning director we'd worked with on Ridgeway and West Edge. "Ava, I know you've stepped back," his email read, "but Chloe's team submitted a Phase 2 revision and it's messy. Not wrong exactly, just not aligned. If you're consulting now, we'd rather work directly with you. Let me know." Then came Rock Ridge Construction, the team we'd partnered with on 3 joint builds over the last 2 years. Their VP called me directly. "We like Sinclair's history, but frankly, Chloe's disorganized and we don't have time to babysit a learning curve." Each message brought with it a strange mix of emotions. Validation, of course, a quiet, simmering satisfaction, but also grief. I hadn't just lost a company, I'd lost a legacy. And now it was unraveling in real time. But it wasn't my problem anymore. And yet, somehow, it was. Natalie saw the shift before I did. "These aren't just compliments," she said. "They're signals. They're telling you the brand was never Sinclair. It was you." She was right. I'd carried that company's credibility on my back for years, not with flashy pitches, but with quiet execution, with structure and follow-through, with trust. And now that I wasn't there to hold it up, people were realizing what they'd actually been relying on. Still, I hesitated. I didn't want to look like I was poaching. I didn't want revenge to drive my next move. But by the second week, I realized I didn't have to reach for anything. People were already choosing me. Not because I asked, because they remembered. They remembered who returned their calls, who walked sites in the rain, who knew how to resolve disputes without burying people in legalese. They remembered Ava, not Sinclair. So I began taking meetings. Not flashy pitches, no brochures, just quiet conversations over lunch or coffee. People asked if I was available. I said yes, but on my terms. That became the standard. My terms. One by one, clients migrated. Not in protest, just in confidence. The kind that doesn't need a press release. One small business in Raleigh asked me to oversee a budget recovery after Chloe's team missed a timeline by 3 weeks. A hospital system in Greensboro reached out after hearing I'd left Sinclair. "We trust you. We don't trust the new setup." A longtime municipal planner texted, "We'll follow you wherever you go. Let us know when you're ready." That's when I knew. I didn't need to fight Sinclair. I didn't need to take them down. They were doing that on their own. And the people who mattered? They were already voting, with their contracts, their calls, their confidence. The final confirmation came from an unexpected place. Carlos, a senior foreman who'd been at Sinclair for 12 years. He called late one evening after his shift. I picked up, surprised. "You built that place," he said quietly. "And we all knew it. Some of us stayed quiet because we needed the check, but we saw it. I saw it. I just wanted to say that." I swallowed hard. "Thank you." "You working solo now?" he asked. "Consulting. Building something new." "Well," he said, "if you need boots on the ground, I'm available nights and weekends." That was the moment it all clicked. This wasn't about rebuilding out of spite. It was about building better, with people who believed in me, not just tolerated me. I wasn't asking for loyalty. I was finally earning it the right way. 3 weeks had passed since Chloe's first text, the vague, half-hearted apology she sent late at night, the one I never replied to. I'd moved on. Not emotionally, some bruises take longer to fade, but professionally, yes. My consulting business was up, running, and gaining traction faster than I'd predicted. Clients kept coming, word was spreading, and more than anything, I was at peace with my silence. Then she reached out again. This time it wasn't an apology, it was an ask. The message came in on a Tuesday mid-morning, just as I was preparing for a client call. I glanced at my phone and saw her name, Chloe Sinclair. A long message, not her usual clipped style. Ava, I need to talk. Something serious has come up with Westridge. We're over budget, behind schedule, and I'm getting pressure from every direction. I know we're not okay right now, but you understand this build better than anyone. I need your help, please, just a conversation. I read it twice, then again. This wasn't an olive branch, it wasn't even contrition, it was desperation. She wasn't reaching out because she missed me, she was reaching out because she was in over her head. The very project I'd launched, negotiated, and planned down to the day, she was now fumbling it, and she wanted me to clean it up. I didn't respond immediately. I forwarded the message to Natalie. Her reply came 10 minutes later. Predictable. But don't underestimate the leverage this gives you. I wasn't sure how to feel. Part of me wanted to ignore her completely, let her drown in the mess she created. Another part, the part that had built the Westridge project from nothing, felt sick thinking about it failing. Not for her sake, for the city, for the crews, for the people who had put their trust in the timeline and budget I'd created. That evening, I called Carlos. "Let me guess," he said. "She needs you." "She says Westridge is falling apart." "Westridge only worked because you ran it like a machine," he said flatly. "I've got buddies on site now. No leadership. Materials delayed. Teams confused. It's bad, Ava." "What would happen if it stalls?" "Public trust goes out the window. Delays get expensive. The mayor's office is already getting heat over it. This could stain the Sinclair name for years." It took me a moment to realize what he meant. The Sinclair name. The one I had spent years building. The one Chloe was now tarnishing. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about all the people who had trusted me, not just clients, but workers, engineers, residents waiting on those facilities to open. People who didn't care about the Sinclair family drama. People who just wanted their community center, their school wing, their new medical clinic. By morning, I had made my decision. I texted Chloe back, "I'll hear you out, 30 minutes, phone only." She replied instantly, "Thank you, truly." We spoke that afternoon. Her voice was strained, not tearful, just overwhelmed. She jumped right into it. Delayed permits, vendor miscommunication, revised architectural plans that didn't meet code. The budget had ballooned by $4.8 million, and the board was threatening to cut their losses. I listened silently for the first 10 minutes. Then I said, "You didn't bring me on when it mattered. You waited until it was falling apart." "I know," she said, "and I was wrong. I thought I could handle it." "Because you had a title?" I asked. "Because I didn't want to prove everyone right, that I couldn't," she admitted. There it was. The first real admission of vulnerability I'd ever heard from her. "I'll help you," I said slowly, "but only on my terms. Not as your sister, not as a former employee. As a paid consultant, under my business, with full independence. I don't answer to Sinclair leadership. I answer to the results." There was a pause. Then, "Yes, of course, whatever you need." I drafted the terms that evening. Natalie reviewed them. It was a clean contract, tight, professional, and expensive. I wasn't offering a favor. I was offering a rescue, and rescues came at a premium. 2 days later, we signed. That weekend, I walked the Westridge site again for the first time in months. The energy was different. People were stressed, disorganized, unsure of who was calling the shots. I spent 3 hours talking to team leads, reviewing procurement schedules, identifying bottlenecks, and then I went home and made a new project timeline, realistic, efficient, airtight. I wasn't back. Not with them. But I was back in my element, and that felt better than I expected. The first thing I rebuilt wasn't the budget or the schedule, it was the trust. You can't fix a project if the people on the ground don't believe you know what you're doing. And after Chloe's missteps, belief was in short supply. When I returned to the Westridge site as an independent consultant, I didn't show up in heels with a clipboard. I wore my steel toes, old jeans, a fitted vest with a clipboard tucked under my arm, and no entourage. I shook hands with the foreman, spoke directly to the engineers, and listened more than I talked. I didn't mention my family. I didn't mention Sinclair. I only said one thing that mattered. We're getting this back on track. They believed me. Within 48 hours, I'd reviewed all procurement logs, cross-checked vendor delivery timelines, and flagged a dozen mismatches that explained the delays. Chloe's team had ordered the wrong window specs. One of the HVAC units didn't meet code. Permits had lapsed, and instead of communicating the gaps, they'd just pushed forward, hoping no one would notice. But people noticed. The city council had already received complaints from nearby residents about construction trucks idling in no parking zones, and the zoning committee was threatening to freeze the next approval phase. We were one mistake away from total shutdown, so I fixed it. I made 3 calls that first day, one to the city's zoning liaison, one to the vendor holding the delayed materials, and one to the mechanical contractor who'd been trying to get answers for 3 weeks. I didn't bluff. I didn't overpromise. I just told the truth. We're cleaning it up. Starting today. The next morning, I called a site-wide huddle. Look, I said, standing in front of 30 tired, skeptical workers, I know things have been messy. That stops now. You're not chasing ghosts anymore. I'm rebuilding the master schedule myself, and you'll have daily updates, real ones, not guesses. You show up, I show up. You give me your best, I'll give you mine. Fair? No cheers, no applause, just a few slow nods and a silence that felt like consideration. That was enough. By the end of the week, I'd rolled out a revised 60-day plan, adjusted the milestone incentives to align with actual site progress, and renegotiated a logistics contract that freed up $310,000 in savings. Chloe's leadership had left the project overcomplicated and bloated. I simplified everything. We didn't need flashy rebrands. We needed workflow. And word started to spread. City officials noticed the change. Site workers started calling me the boss, without irony. Even the subcontractors, who had been planning their exit, renewed their contracts after seeing my revised plan. The architect emailed me a single line on day 10. It's finally running like it should have months ago. Thank you. Chloe, to her credit, stayed out of the way. I'd asked for full operational independence, and she honored it. I heard through a mutual contact that she'd started stepping back from daily decisions, leaving internal operations to the COO. She was still the owner, but it was clear she was watching me, carefully, quietly, probably wondering if this was the beginning of her redemption or the beginning of her replacement. Natalie called to check in. So, she said, how does it feel? To walk back in and fix what fell apart? Strange, I admitted. Satisfying too, but mostly it feels like proving something to myself. That you never needed the company name to command respect? Exactly! Because that was the truth. For years I thought my value was tied to Sinclair, that the logo gave me credibility. But here I was, no longer on payroll, no longer under their roof, and still leading, still solving, still being followed, not because of who I was related to, but because of how I worked. 3 weeks into the project recovery, we hit our first major milestone ahead of schedule. The framing crew finished the structural shell on the community center 8 days early. I brought breakfast to the crew the next morning, bacon, biscuits, coffee, and handed out handwritten thank you notes with their bonus checks. It wasn't about the money. It was about showing up. And that kind of leadership? You can't fake it. Rebuilding the project gave me something I hadn't realized I'd lost. Belief in my own power, not control, not revenge, just confidence that I could build something better, even if someone else had tried to bury me. I went home that night, lit a candle, and opened my journal. The same one I'd written in the night I found the documents that broke everything. At the top of the page, I wrote, Westridge is back on track, so am I. Then, underneath, reputation isn't what people say about you, it's what you build when they're not watching. I didn't invite them. Let's start there. My parents showing up at the Westridge site wasn't planned, requested, or welcomed. They came on a Thursday morning, unannounced, just as we were running a progress check with the framing crew. I was standing over blueprints with two of the engineers, reviewing a beam modification, when I felt it, that shift in air when someone walks in you didn't expect to see. I looked up, and there they were. My father in a pressed button-down and construction boots too clean to be believable. My mother in dark jeans and a blazer, holding a takeaway coffee like she was stopping by a real estate tour. They didn't belong there, not anymore. But there they stood, taking in the sight with eyes I couldn't quite read, part curiosity, part regret. Carlos walked up behind me and muttered, "Looks like the board of directors just arrived." I didn't laugh. I didn't smile. I didn't go to greet them either. I finished the discussion I was having with my crew, then walked over calmly. "What are you doing here?" I asked. My father answered first. "We wanted to see the progress. We've been hearing good things." I raised an eyebrow. "From who?" "Chloe," my mother said quickly. "She told us you'd turn things around. We wanted to see it for ourselves." That line hit me sideways. Not, "We wanted to support you." Not, "We're proud of what you're doing." Just, "We wanted to see it." Like this was a gallery exhibit or a performance they could casually observe from the sidelines. "This isn't a show," I said plainly. "It's a job site, a project, a commitment." My father nodded. "Understood. We don't want to interfere. We're just impressed." That was new. "Are you?" I asked. He looked around at the progress. The steel framing already completed, the teams working efficiently, the updated schedules clipped to the mobile board by the command trailer. "Yes," he said, "you've made it efficient. You brought it back in line." My mother added, "And the morale? I can feel the difference. It feels stable again." I studied their faces for a moment. They weren't faking it. They genuinely didn't expect to see this much progress. And the reason was obvious. They didn't think I could do it without them, or without the Sinclair name behind me. "You thought I'd fall apart," I said, not accusingly, just stating the truth. They didn't deny it. My father looked uncomfortable. "We were worried." "No, you were convinced," I said. "You didn't believe I could lead outside your shadow." My mother's voice softened. "Ava, we never wanted you to leave the company." "You didn't give me a choice," I said. "You handed over everything I built to Chloe, and now you're watching me fix what she couldn't manage." There was silence between us, and for the first time I saw it on their faces, the full realization of what they'd done. They hadn't just underestimated me, they'd bet against me, and I had won. "I'm not coming back," I said, "in case that's what this is about." My father's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. My mother, to her credit, just nodded slowly. "We can see that." "Then why come?" I asked again. "Because," she said quietly, "we needed to see it with our own eyes. What you're capable of. Who you've become." I paused. That line didn't sting like the others. It didn't absolve them, but it felt like a thread. A beginning. Maybe. "Well," I said, glancing around the site, "this is who I've always been. You just didn't see it until I left." They stayed a few more minutes. My father shook Carlos's hand. My mother asked one of the site managers about the projected finish date, but they didn't linger. They left without ceremony, walking back toward their SUV and disappearing down the gravel access road. When they were gone, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Carlos came over again. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just surprised." "They looked surprised too," he said, like they expected to see a mess and walked into a machine. I smiled. A small one. That afternoon, I stood by the temporary fencing at the east end of the site, watching the sunlight hit the steel framework. We were on track to complete this phase 2 weeks ahead of the revised schedule. The community center was coming together, the workers were engaged, the vision was intact. It had taken betrayal to find my footing. It had taken exile to recognize my value, and now my work was finally speaking louder than their decisions ever had. It came on a Monday morning, an email from a private equity firm out of Atlanta. Clean subject line, formal tone, no red flags. The kind of message you only get when your name starts circulating in the right rooms. Subject: Exploring strategic acquisition opportunities. Ava Sinclair Consulting. I almost deleted it. I'd been getting a few growth partnership emails lately, most of them vague, some from recruiters, others from business accelerators hoping I'd sign on for a webinar or exclusive founders roundtable. But this one was different. It included numbers, real ones. They weren't just kicking tires, they were serious. The email outlined a proposal to purchase majority ownership of my firm, with me retained as principal consultant and head of operations, a generous upfront payout, a multi-year contract, autonomy over staffing and projects, and an offer to triple my client base in less than a year. It felt like winning something I hadn't entered. Still, I was skeptical. I didn't build this firm to sell it, not yet, and I certainly didn't want to lose control. But I was curious. I forwarded the email to Natalie and asked her to vet it. She called me an hour later. "You're going to want to sit down," she said. "Why?" I pulled their funding history. One of their senior partners is listed as a strategic advisor. Guess who it is? I already knew. My chest went tight. Chloe. Bingo. I stared at the screen for a long moment. So this wasn't just a firm looking to invest. This was a backdoor, a move, a reach. I didn't know whether to be flattered or furious. "Any chance she doesn't know?" I asked. "Doubtful. She's been working closely with them on other expansions. My guess? She's not the face, but she's behind it. Maybe she thought you'd bite if it didn't come from her." It made a strange kind of sense. The same sister who once took everything from me was now trying to buy her way back into my orbit, quietly, strategically, under another name. And suddenly, her recent silence felt less like peace, and more like planning. I didn't reply to the email, not right away. I needed to think. I spent the rest of the day reviewing everything I'd built. My client list had doubled since launching. My name was attached to 3 high-profile projects now, on pace to finish under budget and ahead of schedule. I had 2 part-time associates under contract and was considering hiring a third. I was building something real and resilient. So why sell? I didn't need the money. I didn't want to scale beyond recognition. And most importantly, I didn't want to answer to anyone with Chloe's fingerprints on the steering wheel. But I also knew this wasn't just business for her. This was image repair. She wanted access to what I had rebuilt because it worked, because people respected it, because it made her look bad by comparison. And maybe, deep down, she wanted to feel connected to something successful again, even if she had to buy it. That evening I called Natalie. "I want to respond," I said, "but not with interest." "I figured," she said. "How direct do you want to be?" "Professional, clear, but unmistakable." I drafted the reply that night. It read, "Thank you for your interest in Ava Sinclair Consulting. At this time, I am not entertaining acquisition or investment proposals. This firm was built on independence, integrity, and direct leadership, and will remain so. Please feel free to remove me from future acquisition inquiries. Regards, Ava Sinclair. No anger, no dramatics, just a clean boundary." I hit send. 3 days later, Chloe texted, "I heard you got our offer. No hard feelings. I just thought it might be a way to work together again. Was worth a shot." I didn't reply. There was nothing else to say, because her message confirmed everything. She hadn't reached out to rebuild a relationship. She hadn't even apologized in person. She wanted a shortcut, and now she knew I wasn't giving her one. I didn't burn the bridge, I just removed the road. That weekend, I stood at the edge of the Westridge site, now weeks ahead of schedule, with new exterior walls going up and crews that ran like a well-oiled machine. One of the electricians waved at me. I waved back. Behind me, a quiet voice said, "You've done something incredible here." It was Jenna, the project manager from Greenwood. "We're ready to start our next phase," she said, "and honestly, we don't want to work with anyone else." I smiled. You won't have to. I used to think walking away would feel like quitting, like giving up on something I'd invested too much in to leave behind. I'd spent years convincing myself that staying, pushing through, proving myself, was strength. That if I just worked harder, kept my head down longer, they'd finally see me the way I saw myself. But standing at the edge of the Westridge site, watching crews finish a project they said couldn't be saved, I realized something I hadn't been able to admit until that moment. I wasn't walking away from my family, I was walking toward myself. That afternoon, I met with city officials to hand off the final project schedule. Everything was back on track. Not just built right, but built better. Under budget, ahead of schedule, respected by every vendor and crew on site. One of the inspectors shook my hand and said, "We should have had you running this from day one." I thanked him, smiled, and left without looking back. The next day, I finalized 3 new consulting contracts. Word had spread far beyond Charlotte. Projects in Atlanta, Nashville, and even Seattle had come through referrals. What started as damage control had turned into opportunity, not because I was lucky, because I had built something real, quietly, patiently, my way. I turned down another offer that week, this one from a national firm wanting to license my name on their leadership platform. They dangled a sizable check and a long-term stake. But I knew what it was, a buy-in to control, not a partnership. I didn't need validation from someone else's banner. I already had what mattered: reputation, clarity, freedom. Chloe didn't reach out again. I think she knew. Not just that I'd passed on the offer, but that she'd lost something she couldn't buy back. There are things titles can't earn and money can't fix: respect, trust, presence. And while I no longer wished her failure, I didn't wish to be part of her success either. My parents sent a card, handwritten, from both of them. It didn't apologize directly, but it acknowledged what I'd done. "You rebuilt something we didn't know was possible. We see that now. We hope you'll let us be part of your future, however that looks." It wasn't enough to undo what they'd done, but it was something. I didn't respond immediately. I put it in the drawer next to the resignation letter I never printed, a reminder of who I'd been, who I wasn't anymore. I spent the last day of the Westridge project walking the perimeter, checking details, talking with team leads, saying thank you. No cameras, no press, just a quiet closure to something I once thought would break me. As I left the site for the last time, I paused at the gate and looked back. Not out of longing, but to mark the end. Then I drove home, rolled down the windows, and let the wind carry it all away. That night, I stood on my apartment balcony, watching the city lights blink against the dark. The same skyline I'd stared at 10 years earlier when I first joined the family business, full of fire and ambition and belief that doing the right thing was enough. It still is. But now I know doing the right thing sometimes means letting go, of legacy, of approval, of people who can't see your worth unless it benefits them. I poured a glass of wine, toasted the night air, and said it out loud, just for myself. I'm free. And I meant it. I didn't host a launch party, no ribbon cutting, no champagne toasts, no PR blasts announcing the rise of Ava Sinclair Consulting. I didn't need them. My calendar was full, my days were structured, my nights were quiet. For the first time in over a decade, I was building something that didn't depend on anyone else's approval or surname. 3 months after finishing the Westridge rescue, I signed my 10th consulting client. Not because I was hunting them down, but because word had spread. Not about revenge, about reliability. Ava gets it done. Ava tells the truth. Ava shows up. The kinds of compliments that don't go on plaques, but stick in the minds of people who make real decisions. One morning, I got an email from a woman named Dana, VP at a mid-sized firm in Richmond. She wrote, "I followed your work on Westridge. Our last consultant left our site a mess, and your name came up 3 times in one meeting. Can we talk?" We did. And by the end of the week, I had a new project. I kept things simple. My apartment doubled as my office. My hours were my own. I still worked hard, old habits. But now it felt different. No anxiety laced between every meeting. No walking on eggshells around people who thought love had to be earned through exhaustion. I was running lean, smart, sharp, exactly the kind of life I'd always thought I'd have to wait for someone else to give me. I gave it to myself. I still saw my parents sometimes, briefly, respectfully. They didn't ask me to come back to the company again. I think they finally understood that invitation was no longer on the table. My mother sent articles she thought I'd like. My father occasionally forwarded reports I'd written years ago with short comments like, "Still some of the cleanest ops data we've seen." Small attempts at connection. I accepted them for what they were, late acknowledgments, not restitution. And Chloe? She stayed quiet. Her name still floated past me sometimes, through industry updates, shared vendors, a passing comment in a board meeting. She wasn't failing exactly, but she wasn't leading either. The company limped along, more brand than backbone. I didn't root for her downfall, but I didn't lift a hand to help anymore. Some bridges don't need to be burned, they just need to be left behind. One afternoon in early spring, I visited Freedom Park again, the same path I'd walked in silence after learning the truth. This time I had a coffee in hand, earbuds in, and a proposal draft waiting at home. There was no grief this time, just stillness. That kind of deep breath you take when you finally stepped out of the fog. I passed a bench where two younger women were sitting, clearly mid-career, talking about clients, meetings, burnouts, boys. One of them said, "Sometimes I wonder if they even see me, or just what I can do for them." I didn't interrupt, but I smiled as I walked past, because I knew the answer now. They don't see you, until you leave, until you stop shrinking, until you stop asking for room and start taking it. That night, I opened my journal and wrote one final line on the last page. They gave her the company. I built my own legacy. She got a shortcut. I took the long road, but I made it mine, and I never had to beg to be chosen again. Ava's story is one of the most compelling examples I've seen of what quiet revenge really looks like. Not through confrontation, not by tearing others down, but by reclaiming space, rewriting worth, and letting the work speak for itself. What makes her arc extraordinary isn't just the betrayal she endured, it's the way she didn't let that betrayal define her final chapter. As a content strategist who's read hundreds of these scripts, I can confidently say this story doesn't just end strong, it teaches something quietly powerful. That walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That legacy is built, not given. And that the greatest revenge is being able to say, "I'm free, and I'm still standing." If this story touched you, subscribe to Revenge with Seren. Because some revenge needs no knives, no screaming. Just one spotlight, one shining nameplate, and someone they once dismissed, rising, brilliant and unshaken. See you in the next story.